In Malta, there are nights when the limestone seems to hold warmth like a secret. Not heat exactly, more like a memory. The walls breathe it back slowly, after the sun is gone, after the sea has turned black, after the last bus has sighed away down the road. This story begins on one of those nights. A small apartment in Xifajk, third floor. The kind of place where you can hear your neighbors living if you listen. A chair dragging, a spoon against a mug, someone laughing at a screen. Outside, a single street lamp makes everything look slightly staged, like a set built for a quiet scene. And inside, a man named Luca was losing his mind over a missing set of keys. Not the dramatic kind of losing his mind, the everyday kind, the slow boil. He had checked his pockets 3 times. He had checked the kitchen counter, the sofa cushions, the bathroom sink, the little plate by the door that was specifically meant for keys because he was trying to be a responsible adult. Nothing. He stood in the hallway, holding his jacket in both hands, staring at the empty plate as if the keys might appear out of embarrassment. They did not. He exhaled, then laughed once, short and dry. "Fine," he said to the apartment, as if the apartment was being difficult on purpose. "Fine, I am late. Great." He went back into the living room and began the second search, the angry search, the one where you open drawers that cannot possibly contain keys, but you open them anyway because logic has left the building. Nothing. His phone buzzed, a message from his sister. "Where are you?" Luca typed with his thumbs like he was being chased. "Keys missing. I swear I put them by the door." He stared at the screen, then added, "This island eats objects." He sent it and immediately regretted it because he loved Malta, and also because the moment you insult a place, it feels like the place hears you. He put the phone down. He stood still. Somewhere in the apartment, there was a small sound. Not a bang, not a creak, something lighter. Like a tiny coin rolling, then stopping. Luca turned his head toward the kitchen. "Hello," he said, and instantly felt stupid. He was a grown man. He was talking to his kitchen. Silence. Then faintly the sound again. A tiny tap, a little click. He walked into the kitchen. The light above the sink was off, but the street lamp outside pushed a pale rectangle through the window. The counter was clean. The kettle sat where it always sat. The dish rack held 3 plates and a fork, nothing unusual. And yet Luca felt, for a moment, as if he was not alone. Not in a threatening way. More like in the way you feel when someone is behind you in a shop aisle, and you do not want to turn too quickly because you will look weird. He turned anyway. Nothing. He rubbed his face with both hands and sighed. That was when he noticed the sugar jar. It was slightly angled, like it had been nudged. Just a few degrees. Enough that Luca noticed it because he was already in a ridiculous mood, and his brain was collecting reasons to accuse the universe. He reached for the jar, straightened it, and saw something behind it. A small object. Metal glint. His keys. Luca froze with the keys half visible, as if they might retreat. He picked them up slowly. They were cold, real. The keychain was the same one he had bought from a little stall in Valletta, the one that said Malta in chunky letters because his sister teased him for loving tourist things. He stared at them, then turned his head back to the kitchen as if expecting applause. "Very funny," he said. Silence. He put the keys in his pocket like he was hiding them from an enemy, grabbed his jacket, and went out the door. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent and someone else's dinner. He locked the apartment, checked the keys again, and walked down the stairs. By the time he reached the street, he had convinced himself it was his own fault. Of course it was. He had probably put the keys down in the kitchen without thinking. He was tired. He was stressed. He was looking for drama. He took 3 steps toward his car and stopped. His car keys were in his pocket, but his car was parked across the street, and the street was narrow, and Malta is not generous with parking spaces. And his car was not where it should have been. It was not stolen. It was simply not there. Luca stood in the street, blinking, as if his eyes needed to reload. A couple walked past him, talking softly in English. Luca turned slowly in a circle. The car was not nearby. It was not around the corner. It was not hidden behind another vehicle. It had vanished. He felt his chest tighten. He pulled out his phone and opened the map app, because that is what people do now when reality misbehaves. As if GPS can argue with the universe. He stood there, staring at his phone, while the street lamp hummed faintly above him. Then he heard laughter. Not loud laughter, not human laughter either. A tiny sound, like someone trying not to laugh. He looked toward the alley beside the building. The alley was dark and narrow, the kind of place where you keep walking and do not think about it. A few plants sat in pots, struggling politely. A drain cover glinted. The air smelled of salt and old stone. And there, near the drain, something moved. Luca did not see a face. He did not see a body. He saw movement. Small, quick, like a shadow that had weight. His brain did something protective and tried to turn the whole moment into a joke. "Okay," he said, louder than he meant to. "If this is a prank, I do not appreciate it." The movement stopped. Then, in a voice that was not quite a voice, more like the whisper of a child copying an adult, he heard a word. Not clearly, but clearly enough. Xifajk. Luca felt cold along his arms. He had grown up in Malta. He had heard stories the way everyone hears stories. From cousins, from neighbors, from a grandmother who swore she was not superstitious, but still refused to whistle at night. Xifajk. A tiny imp, they said, mischievous, a troublemaker, the kind of creature that hides things, moves objects, causes small annoyances, and then enjoys the confusion. Not a demon in the grand cinematic sense, more like the spirit of petty chaos. A creature that delights in disharmony. A creature that, in some tellings, could even be kept around like a strange pet if you were foolish enough or bored enough. Luca swallowed. "Look," he said, and he hated that his voice sounded careful. "If you are real, then you are very dedicated. But I do not have time for this. I need my car." Silence. Then the tiny almost laugh again. Luca took one step toward the alley, not because he was brave, because he was angry. Anger does that. It makes you feel taller than fear. The movement shifted deeper into the darkness. Luca followed, one step at a time. The alley narrowed. The stone walls on either side looked older here, rougher. The street lamp's light did not reach. Luca could still see, just enough to know where his feet were going. Then he saw something that made him stop. A line of objects, placed neatly along the ground as if arranged for display. A spoon, a small toy car, a hair clip, a lighter, a single sock, a keychain that was not his, a coin, a pen, a small plastic figure missing an arm. Every object looked like something someone had lost, and cursed and forgotten. Luca stared. "Is this your collection?" he asked. The air felt amused. Then, from somewhere close, he heard a soft tap. A pebble struck the wall beside Luca's shoulder and dropped to the ground. Not hard, not aggressive. A warning, maybe, or a tease. Luca raised both hands, palms open, like he was speaking to a nervous cat. Okay, I get it. You are here, you exist. Congratulations, very impressive. But I did not take your things, and I do not want yours. I only want my car back." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the movement shifted again, and Luca felt, rather than saw, that the creature was closer. He could not see a face, but he felt eyes on him. Curious, bright, interested. A thought crossed his mind, sudden and ridiculous. What if it is bored? What if this is not evil, just lonely in the way small things get lonely? Luca cleared his throat. "My grandmother used to say," he began, then stopped because he did not know why he was talking like this. But he continued anyway. "She used to say that if something small is making trouble, it is because it wants attention. You know, like children or cats." A soft sound, like a snort, almost offended. Luca nodded, as if this made sense. "Sorry, not cats. You are not a cat." The air shifted. The mood changed slightly. Luca took a breath. "Look," he said. "You can keep your collection. I will not touch it. And I will stop accusing the island of eating objects. That was rude. But you cannot take my car. That is not funny. That is expensive." Silence. Then, very clearly, the whisper again. "Trade." Luca frowned. "What do you mean, trade?" Another tap. This time, something small struck the ground near his foot. Luca looked down. It was his car key fob. He stared at it, confused, because the fob was supposed to be attached to the keys in his pocket. He pulled his keys out. The metal keys were there. The keychain was there. But the fob was missing. He looked up into the darkness. "Did you just split my keys?" he asked. The alley felt pleased with itself. Luca rubbed his forehead. "Okay," he said slowly. "You want a trade, you want something. What do you want?" A pause. Then faintly, the whisper came again, softer. "Promise." Luca blinked. A promise? Like what kind of promise? The movement shifted, and for a moment Luca saw it. Not fully, but enough. A tiny shape crouched near the wall, small as a child, smaller, thin, quick, a little too sharp around the edges, as if it was made of shadow and impatience. And its eyes, if they were eyes, glinted like wet stone. The shape tilted its head. "Respect," the whisper said awkwardly, like the word had been learned. Luca stared. "You want respect," he repeated. Silence. Then the tiny almost laugh again, but quieter now. Less mocking, more hopeful maybe. Luca felt something in him soften, which was inconvenient because he was trying to stay angry. "All right," he said. "All right, I can do that. I can respect whatever you are, whatever this is, but you have to respect me too." The shape shifted as if considering. Luca took a breath, then spoke carefully, like he was speaking to a child who might bolt. "I will make you a promise. I will stop swearing at the island. I will stop blaming the walls and the sea and the stones for my own mess. And when something goes missing, I will not assume someone is out to get me. I will check calmly. I will breathe. I will be less dramatic." He paused. "And I will not tell people about this in a way that makes them hunt you or mock you. I will keep it quiet. You can keep your privacy." The shape did not move for a long time. Then, from deeper in the alley, there was a sound. A car door unlocking, the familiar beep. Luca's heart jumped. He turned and ran back out to the street, nearly tripping over his own feet. Across the street, his car sat exactly where it should have been. As if it had never left. As if Luca had imagined the whole thing. He stood on the curb, staring at it like it might dissolve. He pressed the fob. Beep, the lights flashed. Real. He looked back toward the alley. It was just an alley now. Dark, quiet, ordinary. Luca walked slowly toward it, stopping at the entrance. "Hey," he said softly. "Thank you, I guess." A small sound came from the darkness. Not words this time. A tiny satisfied hum. Luca nodded once, like a person concluding a business deal with an invisible client. He got into his car, locked the doors, then sat for a moment with his hands on the steering wheel. His phone buzzed again. His sister. "Are you alive?" Luca stared at the message. He almost typed, "You will not believe this." He deleted it. He typed instead, "Found keys. Long story, on my way." He started the car. As he drove away, he kept glancing at the rearview mirror, expecting to see something small sitting in the back seat, grinning. Nothing. The night was calm again. The sea was still there. The buildings stood quietly, pretending to be innocent. Luca reached his sister's place late. She opened the door, annoyed, then relieved, then annoyed again. "Keys," she said. "Keys," Luca replied. She rolled her eyes. "You are hopeless." He smiled, and he did not correct her. Because the truth was strange, and the truth was private, and the truth would sound like a joke. Later that night, back in his apartment, Luca put his keys on the little plate by the door. Then, on impulse, he placed something else beside them. A small coin, not valuable, just shiny. A simple offering to the idea that the world contains things that do not fit neatly into adult explanations. He turned off the lights and went to bed. In the darkness, he listened. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, faintly, from somewhere near the kitchen, he heard it. A tiny tap. A tiny click. And so softly he could have imagined it, the hint of a laugh. The next morning, Luca woke up early. The sun was already bright, as it often is in Malta, like it had been waiting for him to stop being dramatic. He walked to the door. His keys were still on the plate. The coin was gone. In its place was a small plastic figure missing an arm. Luca stared at it for a full 10 seconds. Then he laughed quietly to himself. "All right," he said, to the apartment, to the walls, to the warm old stones outside. "Fair." And that was how Luca learned to live with Xifajk. Not with fear, not with obsession. Just with a little more respect for the small mischief in the world. And a habit of checking behind the sugar jar before blamming the island.